Well, welcome back. I hope you had a good day and you finally decided to review some of these things that you need to review. So let's not waste any time. We are going to be summarizing today module number 14, Real Estate Salesperson Program, delivered by Humber. And there is not a lot of lessons, so thank God. Oh my God, the amount of readings we have to do in this course is just ridiculous. But let's just go on and carry forward. Lesson 1, the offer process. The offer process. Okay, so we're gonna skip all the way to the end because that's really gonna summarize the whole lesson. So in this lesson they talk about components of an agreement. An agreement of purchase and sale documents the terms and conditions involved in a real estate transaction between the seller and the buyer. During negotiations, the document is referred to as an offer. Once the offer is accepted and unconditional, it becomes a binding contract, referred to as an agreement. The key components of an agreement of purchase and sale are the names of the sellers and buyers, address and legal description of the property, purchase price, deposit amount, irrevocable date, irrevocable date. Okay, sorry about that. Completion date, title search date, chattels and fixtures and conditions. Okay. So the offer process from a buyer's perspective is the offer process consists of working with a salesperson to complete these 5 steps. So from the buyer's perspective, you have to initiate the offer, draft the offer, register the offer with the seller, present the offer to the seller, await the seller's response to the offer. Once the offer is presented, either electronically or in person, the seller has the irrevocable time period to decide on the offer. The offer process from a seller's perspective. From the seller's perspective, the offer process consists of working with a salesperson to complete these 6 steps. Arrange offer presentation time, prepare the seller for offer presentation, update seller on current market conditions, review and analyze the offer, discuss options to address the offer, negotiate the offer. As the final step in the process, the seller has 4 options: accept the offer, reject the offer, or make a counter offer. If there is more than one offer on the property, a seller may elect to send all or some of the offers back for improvement. And then steps for acceptance of an offer. The offer acceptance process consists of 6 steps. Accept the offer by signing and initialing where necessary. Complete and sign the confirmation of acceptance. Acknowledgement, signed and distribute copies. The brokerages sign a remuneration or commission trust agreement. Retain a copy for the brokerage. Forward a copy to the other party. When an offer is accepted, the confirmation of acceptance must be communicated to the other party prior to the end of the irrevocable period. The acceptance must be in writing and include the date and time. The last party who accepts the offer confirms the acceptance. If there are 2 brokerages involved, a remuneration or commission trust agreement is also signed. All parties, including the brokerages, receive a copy of the signed and completed agreement as soon as practicable. The lawyers for each respective party also receives copies of the signed agreement. The copies may be paper-based or electronic. So lesson 1 basically just talks about offer and how to accept it and what to do, counter offer, all that stuff. Okay, let's move on to lesson 2, deposits and other REBA considerations. And there they talk about, there's 24 pages of reading. We're gonna go all the way to the end and see what they say. So requirement under REBA regarding deposits. REBA has the following requirements regarding deposits. A brokerage must deposit money it receives into into a designated trust account within 5 business days of receipt. All Ontario brokerages must maintain a real estate trust account, which is separate from any other brokerage accounts. The trust accounts imposes fiduciary and legal responsibilities on the brokerage. Additional considerations regarding deposits. A buyer deposits held by a brokerage in their real estate trust account is protected under the RICO insurance program. To ensure funds are handled properly, RICO requires a buyer's deposit is documented. REBA requires a brokerage to fully disclose to persons depositing trust money the terms on which the money is deposited. If the account bears interest, then the disclosure must include the interest rate paid to the person as well as the interest rate that the account generates. There are several types of interest-bearing accounts that are used, and each has different disclosure obligations. The terms of how interest is disbursed must be clearly described in the agreement of purchase and sale and explained to the parties. Buyers may choose to provide a deposit using an electronic funds transfer (ETF). A brokerage must retain a proper audit trail for each transfer in and out of their bank accounts. A brokerage may only disperse a deposit for their real estate trust account in accordance with the terms of the trust. When a transaction has failed, the proper course of action is by mutual consent of the seller and buyer or by the court order. REBA requirements for the offer process. Offers to purchase real estate must be in writing and signed by the party making the offer. As a salesperson, you are required to convey an offer at the earliest opportunity. All offers will identify the irrevocable time period for which the offer is open for acceptance. Once an offer is accepted, signed copies of the agreement must be provided at the earliest opportunity to every party to the agreement. So that was lesson 2. I'm just gonna go over it, see if we missed anything. Define a deposit. Okay, we already know what that is. Define a deposit, part 2. We already know what that is. Skip. A real estate trust account, we do know what that is. Skip. Deposit protection under RICO insurance program. Buyer can be ensured that the buyer can be assured that when a brokerage places the deposits in their real estate trust account, the funds are protected under RICO's insurance program. Okay, cool, sounds good. Documenting a deposit. So obtain the buyer's deposit, deliver deposit to the listing brokerage, deposit funds into the real estate trust account, document the deposit on a trust ledger, and complete monthly reconciliations. Okay, cool, sounds good. Yeah, so that was basically lesson 2. Let's move on to lesson 3. Lesson 3 talks about the impact of multiple representation. Ooh, a lot of reading in this. Let's see. 40 pages? God damn. I read all of it, so I wish you good luck. Please read all of it because there's a lot of information in this lesson. Let's see if this covers everything. If not, we'll go back and see what we can find. Multiple representation scenarios. Multiple representation can occur in the offer process when a seller and buyer, or when 2 competing buyers are represented in the same transaction by the same brokerage. Okay, let me read that one more time. Multiple representation can occur in the offer process when a seller and buyer, or when 2 competing buyers are represented in the same transaction by the same brokerage. Okay, sounds good. So limitations to client services under multiple representation. Prior to entering into a representation agreement, REBA requires the brokerage to provide a seller or buyer with the following information: the services the brokerage will provide to each client if the brokerage represents more than one client for the same trade. Any differences in the sharing of information with the seller or buyer, this includes information the brokerage will not disclose unless otherwise instructed in writing by the seller or buyer to do so, and services they will not perform. Okay. Disclosure obligations under REPA regarding multiple representation. Disclosure regarding multiple representation takes place in two stages: before a representation agreement is signed and before an offer is made. Disclosure and written consent requirements for multiple representation. To comply with requirements under REBA, disclosure regarding multiple representation involves at minimum two steps. Number one, disclosure before agreement. Before entering into a representation agreement, the brokerage must disclose the possibility of multiple representation and inform the client that they must consent in writing before an offer is submitted or presented. Number two, disclosure before an offer. Before any offer is made, the seller and buyer must consent in writing to work under multiple representation. Confirmation of representation status and remuneration obligations of a seller and buyer. Before signing or presenting an offer, the relationship of the brokerage to seller and buyer must be explained in writing and signed by all parties as acknowledgement. This confirmation practice helps ensure that all parties understand who is being represented by whom, the remuneration obligations of the seller and the buyer, and the remuneration payable to the cooperating brokerage. The signatories, including the seller and the sellers, the buyers, the listing brokerage, and, when applicable, the cooperating brokerage or buyer brokerage. Documenting this information is required before any offer. Therefore, it is typically the buyer's salesperson who would complete a form with the buyer and include it with the offer. The seller would receive and review the document and sign indicating their acknowledgement of the information prior to reviewing the buyer's offer. Sounds good. Leading practices for a salesperson regarding multiple representation. Every person involved in a trade must be treated fairly, honestly, and with integrity. To provide transparency throughout the transaction, inform the parties of the reason for each action and how it fits within the limitation imposed with multiple representation. The brokerage's proposal to work under multiple representation should be clearly understood by a seller or buyer in advance for any actual situations occurring. If the brokerage is representing the seller or the buyer, documenting this relationship early would help avoid any misunderstandings or confusion. A brokerage is required to disclose the nature of the relationship if more than one seller or buyer is being represented or provided services for the same trade. A brokerage is also required to obtain written consent for multiple representation. A brokerage may not proceed with an offer if consent to operate under multiple representation is given by a seller or is not given by a seller or the buyer. Okay, there's a lot of pages, but not enough information. Just gonna go quickly through this lesson, see what we have. When operating in multiple representation situation, the brokerage must act impartially and equally to protect the interests of seller and buyers while abiding by a limited duty of disclosure. The seller and the buyers must fully understand the limitations of the service being provided and disclosure of information when multiple representation occurs. Okay. Multiple representation situations. Sounds good. Okay, this is a good diagram right here. The brokerage has fiduciary relationships with clients and must act in their best interests. However, when operating in multiple representation situations, the interests of these clients are opposed and the brokerage is in difficult position to try to promote and protect competing interests. So here you have a brokerage, and here you have salesperson A and then salesperson B. Salesperson A has a seller, and then the salesperson B has a buyer. So they both work under the same brokerage. That is called multiple representation. Same thing if there's a brokerage and they have two branches, for example branch A and then branch B, and then they have another salesperson at branch A and then another salesperson in branch B. If they have a seller in branch A and a buyer in branch B, that is also technically under the same brokerage, therefore it is a multiple representation. Ah, cool. Alright, let's move on. Ooh, which of these situations is a multiple representation? A brokerage representing both the buyer and seller in the same trade? Yes, it is a multiple representation. A brokerage representing a seller and providing customer service to a buyer in the same trade. Ooh, okay. This might be a difficult question for me. Oh my god, I don't know. Let's just say it is a multiple representation. A brokerage representing two buyers purchases. Yes, this is a multiple representation. A salesperson from one office of a brokerage representing a buyer and a salesperson from another office of the same brokerage. So this is a multiple representation. I think this right here, the brokerage representing a seller and a customer, this is not a sales. This is okay. Okay, please don't judge me if I get anything wrong. I'm still learning, so let's see. Oh my god. A brokerage representing two buyers purchasing a property together. How did I not read that right? Okay, so there it goes. So in order to actually get these questions and answers right, you have to read the question properly. Sometimes I have a very bad habit of reading the question and misunderstanding what the question is actually asking or saying. So it's very important to read your questions and answers. Alright, cool. Limitation service. I don't think this is any. Okay, information not disclosed and services not performed include the amount of seller may or will accept, advising a seller how much they should accept. Okay, cool. And then advising a buyer how much they should offer, the terms of any other offer, the motivation or personal information. So you cannot share this information if you're in a multiple representation. Limitation service. Information the brokerage is permitted to disclose. So you are allowed to have a full disclosure to both parties about the property, including factual information, market information about comparable properties or sale or sold, information regarding the potential use of the property. So basically what I think what it means in a multiple representation, you have to provide all the information that you know about the property, but you cannot tell them what they should do when preparing an offer, or how much the other person is willing to accept, or how much the other person cannot accept. So yeah, basically it all comes down to the offer and how much they're willing to pay. I guess that's what it is. If I'm wrong, please do correct me, but that's what I think it is. Alright, so basically we've covered lesson 3. I hope I've covered everything. I hope you learned something. I also learned something today. So let's move on to lesson 4 and see what that is. Lesson 4 is basically summary practice activities, which I don't want to do right now. You can do that on your own. And module summary, we're going to go through it one more time, see if there's any good information here that we can use. We've already talked about all of this. Yep. So I hope you guys learned something. This was module 14. There's not a lot of reading except in lesson 3. So I do hope you read that and try to understand it at the best of your knowledge. I'll be doing module 15 soon. And thank you. I hope you're learning something same while I'm teaching myself. Alright, have a good night guys. Thank you. Bye.